Okay, so you ready? Let's talk about something here. Let's talk about power and the way that the power structure links into our socially constructed consciousness, which is something we've been talking about for a while now. And I think that we're sort of ready to step a little bit deeper into the water and see why this is important and see what your education has to say about all of this. So for a long time, I've felt like one of the wisest stories that is ever sort of told and handed down orally, like a fairy tale or a nursery rhyme type thing, is the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. Now, I haven't really looked into the history of this. I don't know if this is a, credited piece, if it's a Brothers Grimm thing, or if it doesn't seem like it though, does it? Or something else. But the Emperor's New Clothes, the idea that this emperor has this outfit which displays his power and his taste and his overall refinement for the position, and goes prancing about, and everybody's sort of convinced that if they can't see it, that they're the dumb one, and everybody just sort of nods their head and agrees and cheers on this outfit, is exceedingly powerful. Unfortunately, what kind of gets tacked on to this is this story of the tailors who are duping the king and duping the kingdom by telling him this fiction that only smart people can see the clothes, because it sort of adds a weird sort of moral direction to this that doesn't really belong. My guess is that originally this story was told without those tailors, that this wasn't about, clever people fooling an emperor so much as it was about the social construction of power and the way that we all obey and act like we perceive it. Now, as I'm telling this, it occurs to me that this actually has been done by Disney. How did I miss this when I was writing all my little notes? The Emperor's New Groove is, of course, a adaptation of The Emperor's New Clothes, and it does exactly what I figured would happen if this sort of story is turned into a Disney or Blue Sky thing, where the moral of the story, as much as it may have originated about power, is instead played out to sort of reinforce the rationale behind this power. That as we evolve these stories, they go closer and closer to this idea that this emperor is a good guy who just needs a little direction, just needs to learn a few lessons. That in learning some lessons, his innate, inborn ability to rule, ability to be powerful, is completely justified. Because people just love this idea, this divine right of rulership, that once this person is put through the right sorts of mental games and lessons, that they pop up the other side and fulfill this destiny to which they were born. And this really agrees with what social construction does in the face of power. Now, there's a lot of reasons that this may be the case, and we can explore a few of them here today. But I just want to start by pointing out that lots of our fairy tales agree with this. Right? Cinderella and Snow White are some of my favorite examples of stereotypes that reinforce the very social issues that they appear to be addressing. We'll start out with Snow White, because really, what social issue are we addressing here besides the excommunication of dwarves to the inner woods? That Snow White, that this inner power that Snow White is born with, that this inner beauty, and that which happens to shine outward for Snow White too, cannot be hidden. It cannot be obfuscated by a plot that people will end up bowing down to the innate goodness of this person, and that this goodness is married to her power, married to her nobility, her position. So no matter what happens, that essentially nature itself will propel Snow White to safety and propel Snow White back to the top. The dwarves being a sort of human embodiment of nature in this story. Cinderella is the same sort of thing, but in Cinderella, what we really have is showing that stay in your lane, stay in your position, stick with the way things should be, and your value in that position is what's going to save you. That as we watch the stepsisters vie for more and more power and more sovereignty over their lives, that they are pushed beneath the surface of them and are, we can all mock them together. For one thing, they're ugly, and that's nearly completely unforgivable in our society and in many, many societies. And Cinderella, on the other hand, that her beauty again shines from this inner nobility of hers, and her willingness to be subject to the stepsisters and stepmother is just part of the plan. That you maintain your station, stay where you are, and you will rise to the top eventually. It's a really depressing notion that our stories reinforce the power structure. But this is something that still goes on today. Our modern myths, our modern sort of storytelling, be it through urban legends or conspiracy theories or any other sort of number of popular media, centers around lots of the same idea. For example, South Park really pointed out the pure genius behind 9/11 conspiracy theories. That this idea, 9/11 being an inside job, on according to the Gospel of South Park, was perpetuated by President George W. Bush. That he wanted people to believe that the government was behind 9/11. Now, why? And that reasoning was really the best part of it, was that the American government could not let go of its subjects thinking that they are all powerful, that they are in charge, and that nothing can surprise them, and that they would go out of their way and sacrifice their own people in order to get across the goals that they're looking for. The same sort of conspiracy goes along with the idea that the government knew about Pearl Harbor, which was a big thing that people talked about during World War II, or that the government knew about the Lusitania, that the government let the Lusitania get sunk. And if you know what the Lusitania is, brush up on your World War I history, in order to justify involvement. Now, I'm not necessarily going to put that beyond the motives of somebody powerful to sacrifice their own citizens, and I will resist placing that lens on anything that may have hit your news cycle today in 2020. But it's another type of bowing down to power, another type of this emperor's new clothes type notion that your government cannot be fooled, and that if it wants to do something like go get rid of the Taliban or go get rid of some other terrorist threat or something, that they will create a disaster in order to do this and rally the people behind the flag this way. And that was somehow more easily acceptable to many people than that there was a surprise attack using really like lo-fi methods that ended up in the destruction of thousands of lives and millions of dollars of property and what have you. That was the unbelievable narrative, that we couldn't possibly be hit by something like that. It makes you want to consider what conspiracy theories were flying around the empire after the first Death Star was destroyed. They wouldn't possibly believe that, some farm boy in a X-Wing is going to find a way to destroy a small planet-sized space station. I guess maybe that's another episode. Another sort of idea that we have this notion of the Illuminati, these powerful people who are behind every sort of decision that's going on. And again, this sort of speaks to our idea that power is innate and power is something you can't struggle against or struggle with, that you are subject to it, and that there's something liberating in that, because within that, you don't have to make your own decisions. You don't have to accomplish your own goals because maybe they're not accomplishable. Maybe the Illuminati has decided that you don't get to rise to a higher station, and that you have to stay sort of where you are, plugged into the things to which you're plugged in, and that's fine. This idea of the Matrix being a fantastic sort of symbol for this liberating sort of oppression, or Brave New World by Huxley being a great symbol of a blissful type of oppression, that if you just stay in your station, you will be made content and you will be made happy, and responsibility is lost to you. Many of us choose to sort of believe these theories because it is so forgiving. I think it's very natural for us to feel powerless, and for us to look up to something that's sort of in charge. For me, I know that it was impossible for me to imagine my dad being as mortal as I am. And it may sound absurd. My dad was a terrific sort of force in my life, and extremely smart person, an extremely well put together person who, the thing that I can sort of say in something of this length about my dad is that he never once said anything hurtful to me. And that takes some doing. Imagine interacting with somebody and raising somebody their entire life and never saying anything hurtful. This never happened. It's a wisdom that's beyond most people, quite honestly. So when my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer, I struggled with it, and I struggled with it not only because that's a tremendous and terrible loss to have a parent taken from you, especially one you have a good relationship with, but also because it shook my worldview. My worldview that my dad was quite nearly infallible, at least as infallible as a person comes, and that was hard for me to grasp. In the 3 years that he struggled with this brain cancer, I never truly believed that this was the end for him. It was a sort of unseeable thing for me. But growing up, my dad's breadth of knowledge was so impressive to me. Just for example, he knew the name of just about every visible star in the sky. And if he didn't know its name, he knew what constellation it was in, or he knew the nearby stars. For many of them, he knew the distance from Earth. He knew the size of the star. And he was no astronomer. It was nothing like that. But because it went in every direction. It wasn't just stars. That's just one of my examples. History, geography, languages. He knew many languages, conversant in several languages, and seemed to absorb them really quickly. So as a kid, and growing up all the way, I would say, until I really started college, I just naturally assumed that one reason why my dad pressed the importance of school on me so much was because he was the product of his education. That it was just natural to me that at some day I was going to learn geography in the same sort of way that he did. That someday I was going to get this wide breadth of history full of anecdotes and asides and stories taught to me. And that, one of these days we were going to sit down and my teachers are going to say, okay, guys, it's time to learn about the stars. Here's this star, here's this star, here's how you can find this star in the sky, here's how far away this one is. And none of that happened. None of that happened. Everything was very general, everything was really broad. And it was at some point in college when I realized that, wow, he must have been putting in some time that had nothing to do with school. Because I was almost finished with college, I realized, and I had never read Moby Dick. And I was just kind of like, had this sort of faith in the system, this faith in the school system, this faith in the college system, that this was going to turn me into this fully functional, powerful sort of adult. It was going to let me in on the secret of being a put-together person. And instead, what college did was exposed something to me that was so far beyond my initial understanding. And that is that there is no secret. that, essentially that the emperor has no clothes. That being an adult did not mean being put together. That being adult did not mean being wise and knowing just about everything off the tip of your tongue and understanding everything that I sort of saw in my dad. Now, it was a massive sort of realization. And like I said, it sort of started with Moby Dick for me, that I realized, wow, no one ever made me read Moby Dick, which means I don't get to read Moby Dick, right? And I was like, wait a minute, but I can. So I I actually went to a payphone. I did not have a cell phone. Called my dad and said, who wrote Moby Dick? This wasn't something that was easily look-upable from where I was in 1998. And, Herman Melville. So I'm at the bookstore and I pick up Moby Dick. It was a little bit less embarrassing calling my dad and asking that question than it was to ask a bookseller, I suppose. And I read Moby Dick and I was like, wow, what a book. I thought I was going to like it, and I really, really loved it. And I had conversations with my dad about it over the phone because nobody I knew had read it. And this is part of what made me an English major, was reading Moby Dick at this time when I felt like I was about to lose my sort of pathway towards who I thought I was going to be, as my faith started eroding in the system of education. I became an English major thinking that I was going to be exposed to more such books, and again, I found some disappointment there. Some books I never would have read if it weren't for being an English major, of course. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a good example of a book that struck me as quite wonderful, and that I never would have picked up, I believe, as an adult, not in college. I probably wouldn't have read The Divine Comedy, at least not at that age. Maybe by now I would have, but at the time I wouldn't have. So college did some great things for me, but it didn't have the kind of depth I was looking for. And the master's degree didn't really either, and the doctorate didn't really either. And I'll tell you how the second master's degree goes in a couple years. But I realized that there was no secret to being an adult. And not only that, I would say that college exposed me to more than that, and it was that exposed me to the idea that not only was there not a secret, but that most adults did not have it together. That most adults were not wise or smart or composed nearly so much as I thought so. That my parents, being the people who they were, who I think did a tremendous job and everything else, and every day in them I saw them doing their best, gave me the wrong notion of adulthood, because I never saw adults in the same light after I was in college. And of course, in college, all of your co-learners are adults, and your professors are adults, and everything else. And I started realizing that these adult relationships were shaky, that they adult jobs and knowledge and everything else were somewhat fictional, and that none of them sort of held any sort of like power or sway that I was innately able to sort of see and respect, the way that these stories sort of tell you. And I met some amazing people, in college. I met some great speakers, some amazing philosophers and musicians. And a good example is my world religion teacher, who was an absolutely amazing teacher, a powerful person who lectured beautifully and brought us one by one, each one of these religions, into this sort of sharp focus. And you'd read the book, and the book was interesting because it's not really possible to have a book about such deep and powerful philosophies and not have it be interesting. But then sitting through his lectures just was like the rubber meeting the pavement, that it drove things forward in a wonderful way. And I sat next to a girl in that class who, I was in college, and I thought this girl was cute and everything, and she felt the same way about the teacher. And we took a few classes from the same teacher together, and we studied together, and we're sort of friends and having our minds blown at the same time by this teacher. And then one day they ran off to Italy together, this friend of mine and the teacher. And that was disquieting because I realized something, that this guy who I thought was so smart and so wise and so powerful was really terrible at being a person. And that is he left behind his family and ran off with some student to some faraway place. And all of my respect for him as a person was gone. As a teacher, sure, he was great. But why? And why bother and why care? And it didn't invalidate what I had learned, because I had by then had come to discover that the learning was within me and not without me. And but that I was able to see that no matter how put together you appear to be, that this is a facade for so many. And I don't want to use that as a blanket statement to say that everybody is a facade. I think there are people out there who are trying. But the impression that I got, from a very young age up until college, was that at some point you were let into the club. That the curtain was lifted and they said, hey, welcome, you're a grown-up. Now you're responsible. Now you are smart. Now you are wise. And now you can behave in really productive and wonderful ways. And of course, if you've been following the news lately and you've watched our politicians, you probably are better off at whatever age you are than I am in knowing the facade of it all. But school gives this sort of same impression. School gives the same impression that this is the secret, that this is the way, that you are let into the club through the acquisition of your degree. Now, let me give you an example. Again, I was an English major. I was very close to graduation when I was hired to be a arts and entertainment editor for a weekly newspaper. Now, this was a startup. It wasn't a huge weekly newspaper, but I did feel that my bachelor's degree in English was probably something that qualified me for it, and that there was some validity to my taking this job. However, upon getting to that final semester, when I applied for graduation, getting halfway through there, I discovered that I was missing a math class. I had no idea. There was a math class that I had missed somewhere in there that I didn't get credit for or something, and I had to do it, but I already had a start date for this job. So after leaving college, I went and started the job, did a pretty good work there, but didn't have the degree yet. I was going at the local community college at night to do this math class. It was math for life. It wasn't hard. This wasn't, trigonometry or calculus or something. It was a pretty simple math class. But I was busy. I never had a job before, not a real job, just, sort of summer gigs. And I was overwhelmed with the amount of work that I had to do, especially as the newspaper's budget kept going down and I kept having to write the articles myself rather than hire writers. Long story short, my math class wasn't going so well. I was getting towards the end of the math class, and if I didn't complete it properly, I wasn't going to get my degree that semester. I was going to have to retake the class, and that really kind of shook me about the job I was working, that I wasn't going to have the degree for the job. And then a very fortunate thing happened. My math teacher's parents had a tragedy in Greece, and he had to go to Greece to help his family out. This was not fortunate for my math teacher, but I did okay by it because this brought in an entirely new teacher. And this entirely new teacher had a totally different teaching persona, and I was much better able to navigate it. For example, we got to our final math project. I was teetering on a C, did not want to go below that, and I went up to the teacher and said, hey, instead of doing the math thing the way that you have outlined, and I have no idea what this was anymore, I said, can I write a paper about an interesting mathematical phenomenon? And he was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And I was like, good, that's cool. So I happen to enjoy the Monty Hall problem. I'll explain it to you someday if you're so interested. And I wrote a paper about the Monty Hall problem, used my writing skills and put it together, and walked away with an A in the class. And my assumption is that the new teacher either didn't look at the old grade book or threw it out entirely when he saw just how interested and fascinated I was with the Monty Hall problem. Then I had my degree, then I had my job, and I felt legitimized, and then realization set in. It set in that, like, this had all been arbitrary, that everything that happened before the new teacher came in didn't matter, that probably this class didn't matter to my job, and that I sidestepped the entire curriculum and did my own thing and got rewarded for it, and therefore was essentially a fraud. Now I looked around me and I realized, well, I'd been sort of doing this all through college, that there were plenty of different points where I realized that I was navigating the system rather than putting in the work. That there were books that I skipped reading, that there were tasks that I sort of did differently than was assigned. I was always asking to be the exception and to be able to write something different than what was being assigned because I was following my little interests. That's how I was, and I never minded asking, which is also how I was. But that this was not the same degree that somebody else had. That this secret that holding this piece of paper must have held within it wasn't mine because I didn't earn it the way you're supposed to. I didn't follow the template. I didn't follow the steps. And from there, it just took a little while longer for me to realize, well, guess what? Nobody does. There is no way. All of this stuff is fragmented anyway. All of it doesn't. It's a song and bluster. And my accomplishments were real. And my learning was real. But that the curriculum and this notion of a cookie cutter type of learning was not something real. That was the illusion. And that was an illusion that I had believed in. And I felt very liberated from it. But at the same time, I then sort of like looked around and thought, well, if that's an illusion, what is it that I trust? What is it that I'm looking up to, that I'm heading for? What does success mean if the steps can be sidestepped? If there's no prescription for success, if success can be built or added onto or believed in or not, then what was the point of having the prescription? What was the point of having the steps? Why this class? Why not something else? Why that class? Why not something else? You know, here we are, something in the neighborhood of 20 years later, and I have a terminal degree in education, and I can tell you that, that much of the rationale behind how we build our outcomes and how we build our degrees and what body of knowledge we're looking for somebody at a bachelor's level, what body of knowledge we're looking for and body of capabilities we're looking for with somebody at the master's level, et cetera, et cetera. But nobody steps up to somebody who doesn't have a degree, who's 35 or 40 years old, and says, okay, let me test and see where you are on this so we know what degree you deserve, and then hand them over the degree. No, you have to go through the steps. You have to get the prescription. You can't just get the degree. No matter what innate knowledge you have, no matter what power you have of your own. If you didn't have the opportunity, if you didn't take those steps, you're not let into the club. You don't get the secret. And of course, the secret is that there is no secret. The secret is that whatever we collectively buy into becomes the truth. that if we are told over and over that the emperor is wearing clothes, it's more beneficial to agree. Again, the learning I experienced in college is real, and I'm not refuting that, and I'm not saying not to believe in it, but the learning that somebody at my same level, at my same age, may have undergone without receiving a degree is also real, and does not have the stamp of approval, does not have evidence and proof that they've walked through those same steps and the same fire that I did. Even if I sidestepped some of that, even if I redefined some of that for myself. Maybe this person did too. But they're not playing the game in the same way. And the game becomes what's really important here. And this is why both kind of have to be done at once if you're supposed to be functional in the society. And by functional, I mean able to occupy the job that you want, and able to have the sort of lifestyle that you want because of the degree. But also, if what you know and what skills you have and what you've learned matters, that the sidestepping is necessary, that the redefinition is necessary, that navigating the system is necessary. The American dream tells us, do these steps, work real hard, keep your head down, you're going to make it. Cinderella tells us, stay in your lane, pay attention to what you're doing, you can be saved. But what I'm telling you is there is no front door to success. That first of all, the notion of success is probably extremely nebulous in your mind. You think it's not, but now look at it. What specifics do you find in this? What does success mean to you, and how is that different from what success means to me or to somebody else? Our shared dream, our shared sort of American dream, money, sex, power, is one thing, but it's really built on this notion of more by comparison rather than something specific. But there is no front door to the benefits that someone enjoys as they have achieved what we collectively assume means success. You have to go around back. You have to go through a window. You have to define it yourself. Now, just like you're going to see books out there, Think and Grow Rich, you're going to see books out there and infomercials that tell you, follow this plan, trust in the system, that college is a highly disciplined and researched way of selling that same idea, taking those steps and becoming successful. And many teachers treat it like it's on-the-job training, like it's job force training, whether it's to be a doctor, be a painter, be a computer artist, or be a computer programmer. But if that were the case, your future employer would be paying for it. If it were job training, your future employer would be paying. The secret, what gets you into the club, is this weird, antiquated notion that you have to have skin in the game. That you have to integrate yourself into the system. And in our society, it is an economic system. Show your debt. Show what you've paid. You're either paying for it, or you have debt, or you're a charity case because you've gotten your scholarships and you're a write-off for some rich person, essentially. Nothing wrong with that. Sure, work hard, get a scholarship. I believe in you. That's great. But let's be Machiavellian about this and see that what we're talking about here is showing some idea of buy-in to the system in order to be given this socially constructed secret to adulthood and learning and employment. Now, this is highly cynical, and I don't invite you to join me in the cynicism, but I do invite you to question it. I invite you to question where our social construction stands, what we see and what we believe is powerful in our lives, and what ultimately does have power. What is a planned learning experience by someone else, and what is learning that you undergo on your own. And to value those things in nuanced ways. To see the value that it holds for you intrinsically, and to see the value that it has for you constructively, and to not get those mixed up. Because then you will start to see a value of yourself. And then you're just too far gone. You're just too far gone if you can put on yourself some notion of what you're worth. Maybe that sounds weird, but we'll get deeper.